For the group, as always, thank you so very, very much for making the trip here to be at this Radix Live event. And as always, thank you very much to New College Berkeley for making these events possible. I will add that if you haven't signed up to our mailing list, please go forth and sign up, because we have lovely events. At least I think they're lovely events, and you will learn more about those things. In terms of this event right now, most of us are becoming increasingly aware of the benefits of mental health practitioners, and maybe not personally, but we hear increasingly good things. Or in the negative sense, at the very least, if we haven't been living under a rock, we hear that there are increasingly more mental health issues arising, and this is a problem. So I just wanted to list off a few for people. Did you know that more than 6.6 million adults in California, that's over 22%, reported experiencing mental illness in the past year? 1 in 5 adults, it's more than 23%, experienced a mental illness in 2022. Over 396,000 youths aged 12 to 17 in California live with depression, and about 64% of them did not receive adequate care in the last year. Over 60% of adults in the US report feeling lonely regularly, and 1 in 5 US adults report feeling lonely every single day. That's 52 million people who are lonely every day. And you probably also heard there's stats going around that being lonely can equate in terms of deleterious health effects, like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. To make those stats more bad for our non-white siblings, 60% of Black adults with mental health conditions go untreated, and only 26% of Asian Americans who need help receive any care. So the gaps in support are glaring. And while I don't have time to get in a soapbox to talk about why the church should get involved in this, although Craig is going to be giving us a question afterwards, it's really important that we become salty in all areas, because that's what we're supposed to be. So, speaking of mental health, I am incredibly pleased to be able to introduce our guest, Dr. Jeannie Celestial. She is a clinical psychologist who has over 2 decades of experience in healing and transformational practice. She also has academic articles in a variety of journals, has recently co-edited Clinical Interventions for Internalized Oppression, and is also a best-selling author of a book on food. It's called the Filipino Instant Pot Cookbook, thus our title, Banquet of Belonging, Faith, Food, and the Psychology of Healing. And if that's not a great mix, I'm not sure what is. Just a few comments on housekeeping. As usual, this event will be recorded and made available to those who have signed up to the mailing list. Before we get started, I'd like to ask Dr. Jeannie to open us in prayer. After, she'll be taking us through a mindfulness exercise. And I'm going to be talking with Jeannie until about 6, and then she will be taking questions from you, our audience. Please send all your questions to Matthew, to me, and then I will read them to Dr. Jeannie. It makes it easier for us to put this inside of the recording. And unless you specify other words, I'll read your name along with the question. I'm just going to admit in person here. So with that, Dr. Jeannie, I will pass this over to you. Thank you very much again.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. Good evening, good day, everyone, from wherever you are calling from in the world. I am calling in from Northern California, Lishan and Miwok territories, and it is 5:09 p.m. here Pacific time. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but since it looks like Dr. Craig Wong is driving, may I ask Dr. Russell Yee to please open us in prayer?
Happy to. Let's pray. Creator God, we thank you for all your good gifts. And tonight, especially for the gift of our bodies and being beings who are physical and spiritual. And we thank you for the good gift of food and the pleasure of it, enjoying it, being sustained by it, sharing it. We thank you for Dr. Jeannie and her journey, learning and insight into this part of your creation, your good intentions for us. We pray that tonight you would speak through her and into our lives and open our hearts and our minds and our stomachs to your gifts for us tonight. We pray this is in your name.
Amen. Thank you so much, Russell. I know Russell from our church in Oakland, California, from back in the day. So appreciative of his leadership and mentorship through the years. I wanted to thank Tina and Craig Wong for bringing me here today. We know each other through a co-colleague at InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And this, my guesting on this show today really came about after I facilitated a time at a New College Berkeley retreat in Benicia, California. It was a solidarity circle, I guess, if you will, where Asian and Latino church members and leaders, actually church leaders, came together to really learn from one another and fellowship with one another and think critically about kind of the attacks on immigrant communities, specifically Latinx communities in the United States. And I was privileged enough to facilitate a time of prayer through food. And I brought in a dish from the Filipino Instant Pot Cookbook, which is a very simple dish of rice and coconut milk and corn and sugar and water. So just basic ingredients. But we use that as a meditation to think about our upbringings, our beloved caregivers, and each other in this time of stress and xenophobia, and just community attacks on the community. So thank you so much, New College Berkeley, for having me. And thank you all who have joined on virtually today. I would like to offer a mindfulness practice. Now, if you are driving, please, you can just listen and not necessarily try to go deep into mindfulness. And I do ask, do not operate any machinery or anything that could put you in harm's way. But you can just listen and please stay alert up to your surroundings. I would love to open us in this practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness, studies show that it really helps reduce stress. It helps us to make better decisions, helps reduce our blood pressure, it can help us with our sleep. As I have been trying to reclaim my Filipino heritage and kind of learn more about my culture, I went up into the mountains with my mom and my sister and some relatives to some ancestral land that we didn't know about. And we were going up these bumpy roads, and we got there, and it was, just crops and dirt and cicadas chirping and birds. And I was like, this is mindfulness. This is a practice of mindfulness. And so it made me think about the indigenous practice of mindfulness, that every day was mindfulness because there was less distraction. There were no computers, no iPhones, no traffic. It was just us and the earth and the sea and the sky. I was born in the Pacific island of Guam. And so growing up, that was my entertainment. Looking at the sunsets every day, looking at the stars and trying to catch shooting stars with my sister, looking at the Big Dipper, and wading in the ocean. And we did that often, and that was pure joy. So if it's available to you to engage in this mindfulness practice with me, please do. And for those who have never practiced mindfulness before, it may seem hard, but it's super easy. I like to say that there's nothing you need to do to change your thoughts. Just tune into this present moment. Okay, are we ready? Can I see a thumbs up if you're ready? All right. Let's see. Okay, so you could have a notepad in front of you or a device if you would like to take notes. If something comes to you, a thought or a feeling that you want to remember. There's no right or wrong way to practice this. I am sitting. Sometimes I like to stand. Sometimes I like to kneel. Sometimes I like to lay on the floor when I practice mindfulness. But since I'm on the screen, I will sit and be in front of my camera. You might close your eyes if that's available to you, or you might find a spot that is pleasant or neutral to look at. And if you're driving, please stay focused on the road. And bringing your attention to your breathing. Breathing in with your nose, out with your mouth. In with your nose, out with your mouth. Letting out a sigh if that feels comfortable. Thanking yourself for coming here today. You may have had a long day of work or school or family care, and here you are. If you're having any distracting thoughts or sensations, that's totally okay as well. Imagine allowing these thoughts or feelings to float away like clouds in the sky. You don't need to push them away or hang on to them. Just let them gently float. Bringing your attention back to your breath, your body's natural rhythm. And if it's available to you, to imagine a peaceful place, perhaps a beach or a forest, whatever is comforting to you. Imagine how the air feels on your skin or how the sunlight hits objects in front of you. Now imagine that at a distance, you notice a beloved person is walking slowly towards you. It might be a beloved family member, an ancestor, mentor or guide, someone you have not seen for a long time. Perhaps even an ancestor that you've never met on Earth. Whomever it is, you might instantly feel safe around them and at ease. Notice any sensations that stir within your chest or your tummy, your heart, as this person approaches you. You might smile with nervousness or joy as you greet this beloved person in whatever way feels safe to you. Imagine that this beloved person is so happy to see you and wants to learn all about your life. They've also brought you a tasty treat to eat with them. Imagine partaking of this food and notice the flavors, textures, and smells. Your ancestor or beloved person might ask you, what currently brings you joy? What are your passions? What's important to you right now? And what do you live for? You sit together talking for some time, exchanging stories. Notice any sensations in your body that have shifted during this time with this beloved person, and how it feels to commune with this long-lost beloved. You might notice how your head feels or your muscles feel. Notice if your breath has changed. Now imagine that this short reunion with this beloved is coming to a close for today. Your beloved person might tell you, I'm proud of you. I'm so happy to have seen you. But for today, it's time to say goodbye. You thank your beloved person for visiting you. You offer a gesture of farewell, whatever's comfortable for you, and you watch as your beloved person or ancestor slowly walks away, bringing your attention back to your breathing and gently coming back to the Zoom call.
Really.
You might notice any gratitude for this special meeting and exhaling any grief of remembering this long lost person and having to part ways for now or in the past. And thanking yourself for the courage to participate in this mindfulness practice. And returning to the Zoom. And so if it's available to you, if you might voice, if you're driving, you can voice, or if you're on a computer, you might type in the chat anything that you noticed, or anything that you noticed during this practice. And I might call in people. Tina, anything that you noticed in this mindfulness practice?
I had a pretty busy, I was pretty distracted, and I got my vaccine today, and so I was feeling all sorts of like under the weather kinds of feelings. And doing this, I felt like I just was really present with my dad, who passed away 2 years ago, and just walking along the beach and no agenda. But I don't think that I would have, it was a surprise to me that it was my dad that showed up, and it was just beautiful. And we didn't really talk much, which was something that was pretty typical because generation differences, but also language barriers. But it felt very relaxed, and my body felt very relaxed. Like I'd forgotten that I was feeling kind of sick.
Okay. Wow. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, but what a beautiful imagined reunion. And I'm glad you felt just calm and present. What tasty treat did your dad bring?
Oh, so when I was young, he would, my mom would always yell at him for going to the store and buying sweets for us. So he brought those plums, the preserved plums. We call them moy. So sorry. So it was fun to have that, to share that and eat it. Yeah.
I can feel my tongue salivating. A preserved plum.
Yeah.
That's the power of mindfulness. Because when you imagine something, your brain can't tell if it's real or imagined. So it really evokes the bodily sensations. Thank you so much for sharing, Tina. I want to get on with the time, but I also think this is very important because this practice is community wellness right now. And just so as a reminder, this is being recorded. But thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to notice or share what came up for them of what was important in your life that you wanted to share with your beloved person? And you could also put in the chat. And if not, we can move forward. Okay. Well, I trust that, I thank you for trying it out, and I hope that it helped you get into the present moment. So I'll punt it back to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much. I have been late into the mindfulness, and I am always astounded every single time. So I had, when you were doing, and you mentioned about notice the feelings. And so for me, the feeling was in my tummy and the chest, and this longing, expectation that was being granted at the moment. And then also the connection with the group and with you. Thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And it took me a few years to wrap my head around what mindfulness was and to find my own style. So as you can tell, I've kind of like made it my own and interjected what I find to be fun and engaging into my my practice.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the event, we get to talk to you, and some people, they specialize in things like mental health, and you specialize in mental health. And then other people specialize in things like, say, food. And lucky us, you actually specialize kind of in both. So in terms of what got you interested in getting into that hugely popular book that was out?
Yeah. There were many reasons. One was just practicality. I was introduced to the Instant Pot by a couple of friends, and they were both, one was a mom, and her name was Sarah Yap too, and she was my roommate during grad school. And after we had lived together, she told me that she was using it, and it just seemed very obscure to me and like too much. Like I was overwhelmed by the thought of pressing buttons and stuff. And then another friend, Chai Young An, she said she made Kahlua pork with it, and I love Kahlua pork. And when I tasted it, it was fantastic. It tasted just like from a luau or something. And so when I tried making it myself, it was so delicious. And I was shocked at how easy it was. And then I started to make Filipino food. Now, for those who use the electric pressure cooker, you know that it seals in moisture and it seals in flavor because it's cooked with moist heat, and it just seals it all in. And so this is very adaptable to Filipino dishes where we have a long braise or we have stews, things like that. But when I was looking for Filipino recipes online for the Instant Pot, because there is a learning curve of how to use the electric pressure cooker, there was not many resources for Filipino food in the Instant Pot at the time. It was around 2018, 2019. So I approached a friend in the publishing world, and she said that two other groups of friends wanted to do a cookbook on Filipino food for the Instant Pot. And so we all combined forces. We were six parents of young children, working professionals, home cooks. None of us have gone to culinary school. And but we've all cooked a lot with our family, and some did some catering with family and stuff. And so we just did our own research, tapped our friends and elders for recipes, and adapted them for the electric pressure cooker. And kind of the rest is history. I also wanted to make my own baby food. At that time, I was my baby was very small, and I heard that you can make your own baby food in the electric pressure cooker. So I never bought baby food, really. I never bought those little bottles of food. I just made it myself. And a lot of the baby food were Filipino food.
The idea of making baby food, and that I have one of these things myself, and a friend said, you have to get one of these things, and well, not so much. And then I use it multiple times. It's convenient. It makes tasty things. It also is economical, which is very nice. It's the baby food. I'd never heard about that. Neat. Mm.
Yeah.
Because it goes along with eating, I think, in general. And, when we pray, thank you, Father, for this food. So it brings in gratitude. When we were talking at an earlier time, you mentioned about the scientific fact, increasingly well documented, that gratitude changes our brain. And I think that is not just interesting, but also important. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. Well, there are many parts or neural pathways that are affected by gratitude, but I just wanted to call out the reticular activating system, um, because the reticular activating system, or RAS, is kind of like they call it when you go to the club or like a dance club, a nightclub, and then there's the bouncer at the door, and they kind of filter who comes in and who they need to boot out of the nightclub. So that is the metaphor. I love metaphors. The metaphor for the RAS. And so its job is to kind of hone in your environment for that which is important to you, and to like steer you away from danger or things that are not good for you. And so I think with gratitude, when we practice it, it primes our brain towards hopefulness and optimism and feeling good and what's really important to us. And so recently I did a vision board activity with two of my mom friends and our small children, and they really got into it. And the vision board is, can be scientifically explained by, you know, if you kind of look through magazines and find pictures of that which is important to you, your goals, short, medium, and long-term goals, and you put it on a piece of paper and you look at it, and remind yourself what's really important to you, and then it'll help drive you. I mean, in scripture it says, "Press on towards the prize," um, and so I think with gratitude, I think that is a way of priming us towards remembering what's really important in life. I think in first world nations, we take it for granted that food is readily available. In many countries, and especially now in places of genocide where people are starving or there's famine, um, you know, it's where food is less accessible, then folks are super grateful just to even have a piece of bread or a little bit of rice.
Are there any, so speaking as a psychologist, a professional in this area, are there any practices that you could help, that you could suggest to us for, in terms of, being filled with gratitude? Like what are some of those things? And I'm assuming they're probably not that complicated. They're just something that is, something best practiced on a regular basis.
Yeah. There is a modality of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. It is a third wave cognitive behavioral therapy. So basically, noticing our thoughts and feelings. And one of the gratitude practices out of ACT is noticing, like thinking of three things each day that you're grateful for, trying not to repeat things you said the day prior. So try to think of novel things that happened that day that you are grateful for. You might keep it in a journal. When I was dating my boyfriend, who is now my husband, we had a long distance relationship for many years. And so we would always say, "What are you grateful for today?" Or, "What brought you joy today?" And it was fun to hear from each other, since we weren't physically nearby, to from each other what made them smile that day. Um, and it's kind of contagious. When someone is grateful, you feel grateful as well. This is what a type of emotional contagion, because there is negative emotional contagion. Like if someone's very anxious, the people around them might feel anxious, but if someone's grateful, you might feel good too.
Are there any, so you speak about thoughts, and sometimes in CBT, and depend, again, you're the expert in this, but people will say, sometimes I will hear people say somewhat simplistically, they'll say, well, just control your thoughts and then your emotions will kind of follow. And I think that's probably accurate, kind of, and yet I don't think that's the whole story. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, yes. I do like CBT. I do practice CBT. And it helped me a lot actually as a child of immigrants. You know, how shall I say? When you are myself growing up as a child of Filipino immigrants, I feel like for survival, I was taught a lot of black and white thinking. Something is all good or all bad, you know. I my mother had this rule like no boyfriends till you graduate from college. And that's very extreme, right? Because it was like focus on your schooling, that is of utmost importance. You know, I don't think it's very realistic for a young person to like not have a romantic relationship till after college. And I now I think it actually puts people at a disadvantage because they don't get practice in, you know, in love relationships until they're much older. So it's nice to like be able to make mistakes and you know, learn to assert yourself and identify your needs, etc. But anyway, I think the black and white thinking that I was brought up with elicited a lot of anxiety, which now I could see more as inherited trauma. You know, my mother was born in 1941. She was born during the World War II. She witnessed a toddler sibling die of dysentery. She and her family had to run to the mountains to flee Japanese soldiers. And so there was a lot of stress and trauma during her early life. And I think growing up in that kind of environment, she was very, very protective of us. And so I learned to be very fearful as a survival mechanism, but then it kind of became extreme. So when I went off to college at UC Berkeley, I was very anxious. I was very perfectionistic. I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so uh, where I started seeking therapy in college, and one of the classes I attended through my HMO was like understanding anxiety or something like that, and it was all CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it basically taught me about these negative automatic thoughts, and then how to reframe them. And that simple step it helped me realize like, okay, I'm having a negative thought. What can I do to change the thought? What can I do to feel better and to take care of my needs? And that was really Psych 101 for me as a young adult. Later on in life, actually, it wasn't until grad school when I discovered acceptance and commitment therapy, which uses a lot of Buddhism, where it talks about not necessarily having to change your thoughts, but just bringing awareness to the thoughts. So earlier in the mindfulness practice, when I said, just notice the thoughts and distractions and let them roll on by like clouds in the sky. That is a practice of cognitive diffusion, where ACT teaches you don't necessarily have to change your thoughts, just observe them. They tend to pass. And then ask yourself, what do I need to do in alignment with my values to feel better? So for me, I've been struggling, to be honest, with postmenopausal symptoms. Brings a lot of fatigue, anxiety, irritability. So I asked myself, okay, I notice the fatigue, I notice the irritability. What do I need to do to feel better? Because I don't want to yell at my spouse or I don't want to yell at my child. I need to go to the gym. I need to lift weights. And so then I make it a practice to do these things to feel better. And so that's how you can apply CBT to both notice negative thoughts, but also act in accordance with your values.
Thank you. Thank you. Something else, if someone goes to your website, which is a lovely website, by the way, I liked, so when you said it's quote, healing trauma holistically, body, mind, and spirit. And I think sometimes depending on the religious background that we've come from, some, especially maybe some more the Protestant, it can focus more on the spirit and dump out the body. And so I like the fact that you have the all three in there, because I think increasingly we see the importance pointed to it's all three. We have to focus on all the three. So all that to ask, when, you know, that importance to you, was that always something that you've had, or did you come into it in terms of the holistic, you know, the healing of the all three?
That's a good question. I think innately there was all three there, but as a good colonized child, and I say that jokingly, I kind of I was raised by parents who were the word that came to my mouth is victims of colonization, or who had survived colonization, and they taught me to survive colonization. So really, it wasn't until I went to UC Berkeley and started to take a lot of sociology, anthropology, ethnic studies classes where my consciousness started to be raised about oppression and social stratification, etc. I was very focused on cognitive, as I and I still kind of err on that side. I am relearning how to get back into my body, and getting back into my spirit. I have to say, especially those who are in doctoral programs or on the call, you know, I had heard about medical school that they say that they train the human out of you. Um, and I've heard that from some medical doctors, and though I am not a medical doctor, I felt similarly, in my clinical psychology program. Mm, Kind of felt that the human was trained out of me, and also that the spirit was trained out of me. That and in clinical spaces, oftentimes I felt ashamed to express my faith, or I think if I had gone to Fuller or other seminaries, I would be more open to talking about it. But having gone to like a traditional secular university, it wasn't as emphasized. um, so especially when you work in the hospital setting, which is unfortunate, because as we know, that spirituality is something that patients and clients really want to talk about. And so it took me until I was like postdoctoral that I felt more comfortable asserting myself, and my own intersectional identities as a person of faith. And, having served many clients of color, and marginalized folks, many of those people, have some kind of spirituality. So I integrated when I first meet a client and I ask them, is spirituality important to you? Do you feel comfortable bringing it into the therapy or the counseling? And oftentimes they welcome it.
Mhm. In the latest book that you co-edited, Clinical Interventions for Internalized Oppression, that word internalized oppression for some of us is going to mean more. For people who have been to some school, or depending on the church that we go to, we may have heard of it, we may not have. Can you give us some things that we should think about that you have worked through?
Yeah. So internalized oppression. There's even what I don't like about the term even itself, because it's kind of like a blame the victim kind of phrase to me. It's like, oh, you've been oppressed. Now you've internalized it. I mean, one way to think about it is that it's a survival mentality, from being in oppressive systems. Dr. Joy DeGruy, who's an African American psychologist, has this theory called post traumatic slave theory. And she says that that is like the mentality that comes from having survived centuries of enslavement. It's where post colonial or oppressed people have been conditioned to believe their culture, their people are inferior to the colonizers. Um, and then be colonized strives to be like the colonizer. For instance, when people of color want to be white, um, I have elders who use skin whiteners, and even my daughter, she looks at their products and she says, "Oh no, why is she using this? It has poison in it. It has skin whitener in it." And I just say, "Well, I've talked to that elder time and again, but they feel like it makes them more beautiful, so they use a skin whitener." And my daughter's like totally shocked and aghast. But this survival skill, this survival mentality has happened over centuries of violence and subjugation. And the colonized may learn to hate their indigenous or native roots. And it can definitely impact our physical and emotional well-being and self-esteem.
I was just talking a little while ago to Karen González, and she's writing about the book is Beyond Welcome, and talking about as an immigrant, the difficulty in overcoming this aspect of I have to feel white to be accepted, and to escape that, because for a variety of reasons, but including God wants us to be our own unique selves. And if we're not our own unique selves and we feel like we're being forced into a particular culture to act in a certain way in order to be accepted, we're actually losing a part of ourself. And that means we're losing a part of God, and that makes God unhappy.
Yeah. I mean, a funny story from the cookbook writing is that there were moments where I was doing my research and I just cried. I wept. I wept in repentance that I had denigrated my own food, my people's food, and then and even the land itself and the seas itself. So when I was writing about seafood, and I was studying the biodiversity of the oceans of the Philippines, and how that it is so biodiverse, and that that biodiversity is actually threatened. Um, and then I would think about when I had heard elders denigrating our food or our land or our seas, and how I had adopted those mentalities. I also was filled with great pride when I realized that some of these indigenous ways of cooking were pure indigenous. This is a term from a filmmaker, Kidlat Tahimik, who noted that this older indigenous man in the Philippines, he couldn't pronounce indigenous, so he would say indigenous, and then he adopted that to show that our ancestors had genius. I mean, you think about the rice terraces where they created these terraces to cultivate rice. You think about the Mayan, the pyramids, and where they created these structures without computers, or people use the stars to navigate the oceans. Like, what that is sheer genius, and it's very tied to God's creation, which I think unfortunately we're losing as we become more uh, digitized, and more reliant on screens. That we are not taking time to engage with nature.
As a psychologist, and this wasn't really on script, do you have any thoughts on it's sort of like what technology is doing for us? For sure, it's got its positives, and I'm kind of a Luddite, as our emails have exchanged. But what things would you warn the average person like me about the potential problems of technology?
Oh, it's a daily struggle. It's a daily struggle for myself and also as a parent. I feel that, man, it's so hard. I do worry about the ability to interact with one another. I just read a study about current generation of workers who, don't know how to communicate effectively. Um, I worry about, I feel that dating, many people who are trying to date complain that they have trouble meeting a partner. Um, right now I work with a number of youth groups, and they were saying that kids don't know how to start a conversation. Um, there's this anecdotal story of like teenagers sitting at a restaurant texting each other, "What are you gonna order?" "I don't know. I think I'm gonna order a hamburger." "What are you gonna order?" It's like you're right next to each other. Talk to each other. So it's a struggle because it is a great tool, technology, the smartphone, it's a great tool. And I think that we are losing the human connection. So when I can, even though we are on Zoom, I do prefer in-person interactions. And I also appreciate the power to learn and be together over virtual space. An interesting fact, I do like doing trauma therapy over Zoom. I do like doing trauma therapy over a screen. There is something about the person being in their own space. They're able to dive into the therapy a lot quicker um, than if we would see each other face to face in a clinic. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Mhm. As a person who's more introverted, I can definitely give test to, unless if I'm comfortable with a person. If I know the person, then it's a totally different story. But if I don't know the person, being with lots of people, it's that all the things that go on in your head. Interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't mind doing groups. I don't mind doing individual on virtual space, but if it's group, I would love to be together. I would love to share food together. I do enjoy like group things in real life, but for one-on-one, I think video, and it's an interesting phenomenon that um, trauma therapy is it is noted to be as effective on Zoom, rather, in addition to in person.
Hmm. Mhm. Do you want to talk more? Because you're the chapter in your book on internalized oppression. Are there anything else that you would want us to know about that we wouldn't think about? How we could help? How white people could help? How things that just come to your mind that you would want us to know offhand? For the layman person.
Yeah. I really loved my master's program. Before I went to get my PhD, I studied my Master of Social Work. And I went to San Francisco State, which is known for social justice leaning campus and programs. And I had some very, white allies, very conscious, mindful, thoughtful white allies in my classes. And whenever we had class, and this was in real life, this was in the late 90s, um, I had some white colleagues who would like literally um, keep tally marks after the teacher asked the question, who would answer first. And they did this kind of as their own self study. They would note that most white people would answer the question first, and that the people of color usually were more thoughtful, and then they answered. And so my white allies friends later brought it up to the group that, hey, do you guys notice that our our white colleagues are taking up a lot of space in class? And I found that to be so um healing, that it was some of my white conscious classmates who were pointing out to their own white colleagues that, hey, we need to give space to people of color who often need a few minutes to think first before they speak. And when we take up less space, it invites others to take up more space. Um, and in our group work with youth, we call it step up or step aside. If you're feeling shy, feel free to step up. And if you think you're taking up too much space or talking too much, you hear your voice too much in the group, then step aside and give space to others. And so I think, it kind of goes back to, I think it's Peggy McIntosh's the list of white privileges. Um, I think when people of power or historically in power take time to take stock of their inherent privileges, it can be very eye opening for them, and also learning to be humble, culturally humble, and give space for people who historically are marginalized to be more present in the space.
Mhm.
I think the same goes for Americans of all races and ethnicities who go abroad. I lived in Japan for a year, and I just noticed how Americans tended to take up space versus Canadians versus New Zealanders or British people, etc. The Americans tended to take up a lot of space.
I wanted to leave time for Craig to ask, and I think it's going to be something in line with what can the church do. But Craig, do you want to step in now? Are you okay? Or
Sure.
okay, and then also about the fantastic event that is going to be upcoming.
Yeah, well, Jeannie, thank you so much. And as you shared earlier, yeah, I know and Asian leaders, and just my heart is warmed when I think about the role you played there, and bringing your expertise and your food to the table, literally, to help us uh, to really engage in some practices of healing and community building. And so that was just really beautiful. So thank you so much. I so appreciate your leadership. But Jeannie, I guess my question for you is, yeah, as you think about congregations, think about Christian communities, what are ways that you see the need for the church to engage with mental health as an area? How is the church doing when it comes to the area of mental health and mental health challenges? Yeah, so I don't know. That's a pretty broad question, but I'll let you answer that as you see fit.
Yeah. Well, I can speak for my own upbringing, growing up Catholic, and also Filipino. I grew up with a lot of shame and stigma around mental health issues and mental health services, mental health conditions. And so, oftentimes growing up, you know, we we hear things like, "Oh, you're not depressed. Just pray about it," or ask God to heal you, or you don't go to a therapist. And that's only for quote unquote crazy people. Or please don't air out our families' difficulties to strangers. Um, you know, um, so I think that still happens. Um, I had a good friend whose son was murdered, and she was deeply bereaved. He was in his 20s, he was in the prime of his life, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time trying to help a relative out, and he was killed. And, elder prayerful women would come up to her and say, what did he do to deserve this? Why do you think God took his life? Or others would say, oh, pray about it. You'll feel better soon. So things that she did not want to hear and was actually highly offended by. So I think we have a long way to go in the church in this regard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This event coming up on Saturday, what are some of your hopes for what can happen at that gathering?
I think it's important for clinicians to be culturally competent when it comes to spirituality, you know, um, and also kind of lean into your strengths. Like if you're an atheist, then learn about atheism and uh, help people who are atheists. But also, if you're an atheist clinician, then you should learn about other religion. You should learn about religions and how to we say that to be a culturally responsive, culturally competent clinician, you shouldn't look to your client to teach you. You should do your own research, right? And you should um, be culturally aware, culturally sensitive. So I think that clinicians need to do their homework around different spiritualities, as well as if you are a Buddhist or a Jewish or a Christian or a Muslim uh, clinician, then also, be able to use that and use those metaphors, concepts into your work and integrate them into the different modalities. And I think this is what we call contextualizing the modality. For instance, I practice EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so I have served a lot of elder Black women, and a lot of them are evangelical Christians. I had this beautiful older lady who had been in a car accident, and she was both traumatized about the car accident and fearful to drive again. And so with EMDR, one of the practices is to imagine kind of resources or being people, thoughts, concepts that give you psychic strength. And she imagined Jesus pulling her out of, well, she firmly believed that an angel pulled her out of the wreckage. And then when we were kind of training her to drive again, she would imagine, Jesus being her co-pilot. And, for a clinician that didn't feel comfortable talking about Jesus, then I think they're kind of missing out on a big piece in her healing that is innate to her and strongly aligned with her beliefs. And since I never try to impose my religion or faith onto the client, but if we are in alignment or if I'm very familiar with the concepts from their faith, then I'm going to say, how might your faith view this situation? Or what are some thoughts or concepts or scriptures from your faith that might give you strength at this time? I particularly find that useful when it's a time of grief or loss, or disease like cancer, or even divorce. When there's been a big stressor, people really lean into their faith and they want to talk about it.
Oh, thank you, Jeannie. Thank you. I'm sure I have more questions, but I'm going to pass it back to Matthew so you guys could start your Q&A. So thank you so much, Jeannie. Appreciate it.
Great questions, and thanks for doing that. It's long overdue, and we need more of that.
Thanks for your help.
Everybody, this is a lovely spot for you to get your questions in. I am going to ask the one that's in the chat here, and I'm just going to ask it out loud so we got it in the recording. To move an individual from cultural self-hate or denigration to self-love and the joyful embrace of one's cultural identity and heritage, what are some of the key or most important obstacles, particularly internal ones, that one must overcome? What are some of the processes that you help people undergo to overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, such a good question. Thank you to whomever asked that. Something I've asked myself and still continue to ask myself. So there is a model about this kind of notion of internalized oppression by E.J. David and Sumie Okazaki. And so they write about colonial mentality, which is a form of internalized oppression. They have identified 5 factors or 5 ways that kind of oppression affects us, body, mind, and spirit. So, for instance, and so the question is, how do we take stock of how oppression has affected us? And these are some 5 factors that you might want to consider. Now, they do have what's called the colonial mentality scale. So they actually created an instrument where you can like go through it and see how this shows up in your thoughts and feelings. It is focused on Filipinos. However, there's also an internalized oppression scale, I believe, but you can kind of adapt it to whatever oppressed identity you come from, whether it's, your gender or sexuality, sexual orientation, etc., any disability status, etc. So like let me just name the 5 factors. One is called internalized inferiority. You feel lesser than white people because of your identity, or lesser than those in power because of your identity. The second is cultural shame and embarrassment. You feel ashamed or embarrassed of your group. I own the shame that I had of new Filipino immigrants. Growing up as a Filipino American, we used to separate ourselves from those who were newly immigrated, and we call them the fresh off the boat crew, and we, maybe make fun of people with accents. And so we'd be ashamed of people of our own group. The third is within group discrimination, where what I just mentioned, you put people who are less westernized down, you denigrate your own people. And the fourth is denigrating your physical characteristics, your own body. So I remember when I was around about 8, I would cry. And I remember it being in the car and I said, Mom, can I please get surgery to make my eyes bigger? Can I please get surgery to make my cheeks smaller? And I wanted a more chiseled face. And the best answer she could muster up was like, no, anak, that's how God made you. Which was pretty much suck it up. That's the way God made you. um I think she meant to be comforting, but I felt kind of hopeless and stuck. I wish it was followed up with, God made you and you're beautiful just the way you are. And so it's something I've tried to impart on my daughter, who is of mixed ancestry. The fifth factor is colonial debt, which means, the oppressed feels indebted to the colonizer or those in power. And for people like the Filipinos, who were colonized by Spain for a little over 300 years, and then were under American occupation for at least 50, and who people might even count till present day. And especially the role that mainstream media plays, and American and Western media plays into the Philippines. Filipinos or those who are colonized might feel indebted to those who civilized them or educated them or brought them out of poverty. And so that kind of shows up um, in people's thoughts, minds, and feelings. Some might say, like, people who only, like people of color who only date whites, or, they want to marry out of their race. You might want to like pause and wonder, like, why did that come about? And what is driving me to like reject my own people and not see them as attractive? I'll pause there and see if there are any questions or if I missed anything. So, oh yeah, to answer the question, so I think it's important to take stock of how these 5 factors show up in your daily life, and notice any negative feelings about yourself or your people. You kind of unpack that and say, oh, um, I learned to believe that because of that's the way my mom raised me, or because I didn't see examples in media. I wanted my eyes to be bigger because I was teased for having slanted eyes, especially back in the day where they'd make the slanted eye comment and squeeze their face and say imitate, Asian languages. And basically I was teased for looking Asian. And another thing is to really dig into your culture or heritage, whether you're white, black, brown. I think there are ways that white people had to also wash away their origins, their heritage. And so there are examples. Say, I really love the documentary series called High on the Hog, which goes into Black soul food and traces it all the way back to Africa. And so powerful to see how, if we go back to our origins, that a lot of pride can come out of that, and a sense of identity that we didn't know about before. So I think learning about ourselves and really examining ourselves and our ancestry can be very empowering. Thank you, Eleanor.
Do you think, I'd like to ask this question because you're in the field and you hear people's story and you're well read, not just from the popular things, but academic sources. And you don't have to answer positively, by the way. Are you hopeful that things are getting slightly easier for non-white people? I mean, there's still work to be done for sure, but is it easier for your kids than it was for you? Are you hopeful that things are getting better?
I don't think we have to look very far to see how things are not better. Um, In fact, I think the teenagers I work with in San Francisco, especially those of color, are feeling increasingly hopeless, scared, especially those of color or from immigrant families. They don't feel safe on the street. Um, and their parents are being detained or abducted by authorities. So that doesn't feel good. I can't imagine being a young person, whose parent has been detained and trying to even focus in school. It is, I wouldn't say it's getting worse per se. I think it's just, it maybe was invisible or like undercover. The racism and hatred was maybe more hidden, and now it's in plain sight. Um, I would have to say that for those who believe in justice and want more equity in society, we have a louder and deeper call to work towards anti-racism. Um, and that we have to lean into what Gerald Vizenor, who is our Anishinaabe Native American writer, talks about survivance, which is this dogged persistence despite attempted erasure of our culture, and that our our indigenous ways of knowing and healing and being together have always have been flourishing despite attempted genocide and erasure. And so we really need to lean into that. And I think people just need to check their heart. And, I think it's very painful to see people who proclaim to be Christ followers who spew out so much hate and actually cause a lot of violence in their families, in their communities, and in the world, and against the Mother Earth. So let's think about those things as you move forward in every aspect of your life, personal, professional, and otherwise.
I'm not sure how to. I think. Well, you tell me if it's a good question or not. For people who suffer from internalized oppression, and let's say, little backstory. Okay, so I come from the prairies, and when you were mentioning before about some people, the idea of going to the therapist, I know family members like, what? Like it's just like completely upset. And in fact, I know I have a family member who's taking counseling, and they loudly proclaim, my goodness, like most people should take counseling. And I still have that background from the family. It's like, yeah, but I don't know if I need it really. And then as I hear more about the importance of self-discovery, I mean, it's a form of self-discovery. Self-discovery is a really good thing. So disconnected from that. For people who are, let's say they can't go to a counselor or a therapist, are there ways that they can, it's not going to be as good, but are there things that they can do themselves to help that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I love the holistic approach, body, mind, and spirit. I think our bodies, our minds, our spirits are constantly healing themselves. I mean, I think that's a part of God's great design. If I have a cut, it supernaturally heals itself. It's so beautiful. Our body is always trying to heal itself. And I think that's where we can use culture to heal ourselves. When I was highly political in college, I would say, oh, those people are just so into Philippine dance or comedy or music. Like that's so apolitical. It's just so social. But I think that's very judgmental of me. And now over time, I have seen that those are different ways we heal ourselves through dance, through music, through food, through art, and God is such a great artist. Like, if you look at any of God's creation, you'd be so fascinated by the design, the genius in the design, and that is healing, you know. So self-help books, self-help podcasts, they're all available. I don't think psychotherapy is the only way. Church, prayer meetings, swimming, um, creating art, writing, these are all ways to heal. Planting, gardening. When we touch dirt, I think it stimulates like our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest, um, uh, propensity to rest and digest. It gives us oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And so, hugging each other, hugging ourselves, petting your dog, petting your cat, these are all ways of healing. So, yes, yes, and yes.
You talked about the importance of thinking carefully about Chronos versus Kairos time. And probably it's been coming out here and there, and people have heard about it, but I think it's good for all of us to hear more. Would you talk a little bit about why that's important to think about?
I'm still learning myself, but I think that this notion of decolonizing time, it really affected me when I was going through a divorce. I was in my 30s. I thought I had married, my soulmate, and it didn't work out. And I never really wanted to have a child, but once I turned 30, I really wanted to have a child. Like something in my body clicked. And so having gone through a divorce in my 30s, like it was such a loss, because we didn't start a family, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't start a family at that time because we ended up divorcing. But this notion of Kairos time was very healing for me because Kairos time being the time appointed by God, and an opportune time, an anointed time, an appointed time, versus Chronos, which is linear, um, time. And so there's many notions of time. I mean, when we think about like growing up in the islands, if you've gone to the Caribbean or the Pacific Islands or any hot country, you know that time moves a lot slower, in part because it's so dang hot there. You just have to move slower, and you go by the sun. You garden, you farm when it's cool in the morning, and then when it's dang hot, you better go inside and rest. And then when it's cool, you might finish, with your farming. And then when it's night, you go back in, and the mosquitoes are going to bite you. So we go by the sun, we go by the moon, we plant and harvest by, celestial movements. We fish, and we sail by the seas and the tides and the weather and the sky. So there's different types of time. I think, who told me, we were just talking. I like to talk to new immigrants, newcomers, and even people who move here from out of state. And they often say that they're shocked by the pace of life in the San Francisco Bay Area or in California. And it's true. We have a sickening pace of life here. And I do mean that literally. It sickens us, the pace of life, and the urbanism and the traffic, etc. And so I think expanding our awareness of time, decolonizing our time, and just knowing that in God's time, everything will come into fruition in our life. And so, I ended up having a child. I ended up remarrying and ended up having a child at 42. I feel very blessed to been able to have a child. And that was in all of God's timing. I just want to say also about healing intergenerationally. And I see many uh, Asian folks just by your surname on the call. I couldn't wrap my head around ancestral or intergenerational healing until the pandemic. And I started to lean into writers like Resma Menakem and Leny Strobel and E.J.R. David or folks like that. I learned studying oppression and colonization. I do believe we can heal in the present on behalf of our ancestors and breaking cycles of violence and trauma for future generations. And we also do this for the earth. that we heal the earth when we practice, environmental sensitivity and try not to be wasteful, and we steward God's creation. And so that heals the earth. We know that in the pandemic, the air got cleaner because there was less cars around. So we can, in fact, heal the earth. We just have to make mindful choices. So healing relationships and healing the earth, I think, go hand in hand. Well, the question in the chat, I think.
Can you share more about the role of food in fostering healing and belonging?
Yes. So I think along with this notion of fast pace of life, I think we often eat without mindfulness. Like, have you ever had the phenomenon that you're holding a bag of chips and then you maybe go on the phone or you go on your computer and you're like, hey, what happened to the bag of chips? Like, we're not a bag of chips. Like, I don't even remember eating it. I don't feel it in my tummy. Where did it go? Like, we eat so mindlessly, right? Or like when I was working in the hospital, I would force myself to go outside and eat like in the hospital garden or get some fresh air and eat away from my desk, because we are taught in capitalistic culture to keep working while we're eating. In other cultures, like say Japan, when I worked there or lived there, people don't walk around holding a sandwich and a cup of coffee. They sit down and eat it. They experience the food, and they always thought they kind of looked at you funny with your like walking around with a sandwich or a donut in your hand. Like, people just don't typically do that. They experience their food. And so I think mindful eating can be a way of like self-care and being present. Also improves your digestion, first of all. And then, when we were I think if we do sit down at a table to practice mindfulness and to practice like really engaging in conversation with folks, um, oftentimes we'll say I'm in a therapy session and someone's talking about a lot of loss. I will have them think about like a food that connects them with their loved one. So, for instance, citrus, like there's this fruit called calamansi. It's a Philippine line, and that is so fragrant and it's sweet and it's sour, and you can make it into tea. And so if somebody has processed a lot of trauma, I'll have them sit by their calamansi tree or drink calamansi tea, or eat some porridge, make themselves some porridge and eat it mindfully, thinking about their grandmother who has passed away. And I think it really elicits a lot of um, positive attachment to their loved ones, and also ethnic and cultural pride.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of this. This has been really, really, really enjoyable. Did you wanna close us out with anything? Any thoughts or?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I don't know if you've ever had a psychologist before, or a kind of like a food movement person. So I feel really blessed to be able to enter this space. Um, yeah, I mean, I am happy. I was wondering if we could close in a community ritual. In my culture, we often send people home. If you're able to come on screen just so we could see you, that'd be great. But if not, I understand. Um, when we go to a party, we often send people home with food. It is called a babaon, or like baon. It's like a goodie bag, with pancit or noodles or rice or meat. And it's your package for your journey, sustenance for the journey. And I'm curious what folks are taking home with them on your journey after this podcast, this webinar. You could put in the chat or voice it if you'd like to embody yourself through voice. I will start in my to go bag, my little Tupperware or food container. I am bringing hopefulness that you all are beginning to or continuing to bring awareness to mental health in the church, and hopefully um, integrating mental health and wellness into your faith practice. So thank you. I'm just gonna call names. Russell, what are you taking home with you today?
I think bringing a increased sense of just appreciation for the diversity that we can live with in the Bay Area here, and how, just many, many, many different backgrounds are very much valued and treasured and enjoyed, greatly. Growing up here, I think I took it for granted. I have lived elsewhere and missed it greatly. But, not that we don't have our struggles. And of course, every culture is also a mixed bag, you know, um, but we get to be in the mix of it here, which is, I think, is something that's not to be taken for granted.
Thank you, diversity. Tina?
Oh, so much. I just really appreciate you, Jeannie. And I mean, I've always loved food, but to see food as part of healing and part of belonging, it, I don't know. I think it just expands on all that I I I love. I love people and I love food. So bringing it together and then also seeing it as something that can bring healing, which I think, like you said, in the Asian culture, trauma and um, feeling hurt has never really been a part of our like acknowledgement. And so to acknowledge it and then to see it as a healing and hopeful thing, not as this scary um, thing that you have to avoid, is beautiful. And so I just really appreciate the hard work that you put into it, and then really just opening it up and being accessible for the average person to enter into. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tina. Mary, would you like to share?
I'm really glad I attended. It was very good to hear this because I know people who were sensitive about being Asian American when I was a little kid. And now I have a friend who's very sensitive and she's in her 50s. And glad I grew up in California because I feel like, gosh, if you don't have Asian American friends, what's wrong? What's going on here? But I'm glad I attended, and I don't know what I'm going to do because I have a friend who needs probably a psychiatrist, but well, I guess I got to pray about that. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing your friend and their needs. And I will maybe send Matthew some resources that can be mailed out to the participants. Because that is a good question. How do we engage or encourage our friends to engage with help, professional help?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Jackie?
So I am really grateful for you, Jeannie, and I feel like I'm the only Taiwanese person, I guess. Um, I don't know. I don't know what to say exactly, but um, I just really appreciated your talk, and I think it brought to light a lot of the things that I'd been, um, I guess, struggling with, and I didn't realize that you gave a lot of language to it, especially in my church life. And so I really appreciate just talk. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And Craig?
Yeah, I think in my takeaway bag, I take away a heightened sense of responsibility or yeah, or need to be mindful of those who are who might just quietly be self-denigrating, and especially in a great state of fear right now. So I just wanted, I come away with a need to have more of my radars up, because I just think a lot of folks are probably really struggling, but they find ways. I think we all find ways to hide it, and so then if I could add one more, Jeannie, that I think I very much feeling like we, in terms of New College, I think we need to have more events like this and more gatherings like this, and with you, Jeannie. I think we need to explore other ways for you to be able to bring your ministry to a broader group of folks. So I take away that.
Well, thank you for being a leader that, sees needs and potential. So I'm happy to support in whatever way I can. And Matthew, I don't know if you want to close this out.
Yeah, my bag would be the value of listening, and hopefully I can do it better because it will help change people, at least like me primarily. Thank you so very much for doing this. And I know I say it every time, but it really is meaningful every time too. Thank you for the gift for the people who have been here, for your attention, but also, Jeannie, for your gift of time and sharing yourself. We all in our culture, where there's so many things to do, and that you are sharing your time with us and your wisdom and your experience and the hope, but also the lessons. It's really meaningful for me. Thank you very much.
Well, I am coming out with a book. I'm a co-author with Eileen Tabios, and our illustrator is Mel Veracruz. It's going to be a book on grief. It should be out around November 1st. So I'd love to meet with you again, and we can talk about grief, especially for the holidays. It's a kid's book, but I think it'll relate to adults. And maybe we can do a little poetry, because the book involves writing poetry for a loved one who has passed. And so I would love to do that with you all.
I'm pretty sure, Craig, you'd be game for it. Totally count us in. Cool. Wonderful. And in terms of any links, I will put that up in the YouTube video that I post. So if there's anything that you have suggestions wise, please feel free to put those in, and I will send that out very, very happily.
Yeah, people, if you weren't able to ask on the call or in the chat, feel free to reach out at drcelestial.com. There's a contact form there that I get personally. If you fill out any questions or want to say how this time has touched you or got you to think, expanded your thoughts about things, mental health or otherwise, I'd love to hear it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely evening wherever you're at. See you later.
Bye. Take care. God bless.
Bye.